Welcome to our cash patient webinar. My name is Charles Froman and it's July 17th. And tonight's special guest is Abigail Nobel, a health policy nurse with Michigan Healthcare Freedom. And as we do each week, we will first preview coming guests and then go over our commercial plan to empower patients and disrupt the health market, and then segue into our guests to show how they tie together. Everyone is muted, but if you do have a question below that icon up on your right where you can mute yourself or unmute yourself is a hand raise icon. So click that if you have a question, and we'll get to those after our presentations. So the preview, next week we do have a health savings account entrepreneur, Pat Jarrett. That's a big part of our empowerment strategy, as you'll hear tonight. And then in 2 weeks, for those that want a bit more help with the upfront costs of sicknesses, we have another partner in our strategy, David Sleepak with the company Redirect. In 3 weeks, we are big partners with the independent doctors movement. They are all trying to get cash payers so they can kick out their third-party insurance interlopers. So we have another Dr. Lee Heeb. We've had a lot, and joining him will be the gentleman just speaking, David Demarest, from his group, Rose to Freedom. They are promoting our plan because we create cash payers, and that's what they want, cash-paying shoppers. Really disrupt this health cartel. Finally, a month from now, we'll have a Kundalini yoga friend of mine from my previous days as a teacher in that style of yoga, Tom Macklin, a doctor. He is hanging out with NIH types, and he is a pioneer in something that a lot of folks are discovering, that your diseases are manifesting initially in your gut. And he is adding to that with the role of your fascia. Think of these long muscles connecting your tissue all through your body. So if you're going to do a deep dive, as we like to empower patients to really question the status quo and dig deeper, that's going to be an exciting webinar a month from now. So what we are all about, and excuse me if you don't see this entire screen, maybe I'll see if I can minimize this here. Let me see if I can move this webinar panel here so I can show you the whole screen. Should have figured this out before the start of the webinar. Well, anyways, let me move it back over here. We are going to talk about first the patient empowerment revolution, which equals healer innovation, because as we empower patients, it leads to innovation of healers and all the innovations they want to provide the market. When you buy a better health plan like ours, you are fixing a broken market. And in follow-up, if you are interested in what we are offering, just go to a marketing website that we have created, yourfreedomhub.com, and you will be connected to a licensed insurance agent for an official presentation. This is not an official presentation, disclaimer. And these weekly webinars are for 4 people types: 1, families suffering overpayment; businesses wanting a better deal for their employees; health professionals of all types, including doctors; and agents. And what we have done with our strategy is try to solve what we consider 6 big problems of healthcare. First are the endlessly rising premiums. Next, the lack of any incentives for patients to join us in improving the market. Third, the proliferation of networks that do a good job denying you choices. Fourth, the fact that we can't find our medical records when our doctors ask for them. Fifth, all the lost time in seeking care, waiting rooms, etc. And finally, the fact that so much of healthcare is not personalized to one's needs, and we do a good job with that, as you'll find out later. A little visual here. Basically, this is a three-part plan that we're offering, and it starts in the top there with medical cost sharing. This is not insurance. Please understand that going into this. We use medical cost sharing, and the departure of over 1 million Americans over the past decade from insurance to sharing, it echoes similarly the departure of bank customers to credit unions. Both credit unions and sharing companies don't have shareholders. And without shareholders to pay, we can drive profits back into member benefits, hence our cheaper prices. On the lower left, we really are fans of savings accounts for your expenses. We have a couple different ones. But from your first dollar up to a few thousand, we have these great accounts with tax advantages, sometimes doubling your contributions to give you the money to shop around. And then for the expensive stuff, that's when sharing kicks in. On the lower right, we're not going to unleash you alone as a cashier in the market. We have kind of like a Nordstrom's shopper, a concierge that holds your hand just an 800 number away to help you shop for whatever you need: drugs, tests, specialists, tourism, whatever. Now, with us, we have a lot of options to reduce your out-of-pocket. The first is that $5,000 initial unshared amount. That's likely a deductible. If you don't want to pay the first $5,000 of your sicknesses and accidents, you can pay more per month to bring that down to $500. So whenever your issue hits $500, the sharing would kick in. Number two, you can pay less per month if you want to set aside different dollars into your savings accounts. One is the HSA, the health savings account, which we like to market for retirement. It's really good for that because of several tax advantages. Or the new HMA that Forbes magazine just featured for your first dollar in out-of-pocket expenses. That is powerful because it doubles your contributions. So over 3 years, $5 grand of monthly payments becomes 10 grand. And we can discuss that offline later. With us, number three, some of your preventive screenings are free, and Teladoc is free if something happens in the middle of the night. Number fourth, remember that concierge. Call that 800 number on your membership card. You have prescriptions. We have pharmacies overseas. They're generic, they're cheaper. We'll deliver them to your door. That MRI in the hospital is cheaper in a standalone testing center. Specialists, there are great standalone surgical centers now that bundle prices with great recruitment for the top specialists. You can get better care, letting a concierge help you shop. Finally, if you think you're going to be a high utilizer of prescriptions or need more visits to the doctor, we have a zero copay option for unlimited visits to your primary care doctor or chiropractic doctor. Or you can hook up with a direct primary care doctor. They charge a monthly fee, lots of free or low-cost primary care. It's a good match with our sharing. And all of these are ways to cut your out-of-pocket. So what we're selling really isn't sharing or insurance or other mechanisms, but really a healthy care strategy. And it's 5 parts, all in color: avoid, prevent, manage, mitigate, and contain. We want you to avoid healthcare costs by using our functional assessment with modules to improve your health so you can avoid the doctor. Prevent, we want you to prevent disease by taking us up on the limited number of screenings that are free. We want you to manage episodes when they occur with our free Teladoc or with savings accounts and all their tax advantages, or DPC, or that next line, records consolidated in a vault. On your key fob or membership cards, we'll allow you through our website to type in emails from your hospitals and doctors to have them email all the records to you, and it goes into a vault automatically. So wherever you are, traveling worldwide, your doctor is always going to have all your records. You manage your records. Mitigate, whenever something happens, you're going to really start with our concierge. We want you to call the concierge. Let us hold your hand and remind you of the process, because you won't remember the presentation. So just call the concierge, let him or her shop for you to get your drugs test and specialists. We have a health tuning software to help you find cost-effective specialists near you. Medical tourism is an option when you're paying cash. And second opinion is a service to help you get alternative ideas for when your doctor says you need this knee surgery. That's not always the case. Doctors are human too, and they have their own interests, not always giving you the best option usually, but second opinion is a service that's really powerful and popular. Finally, contain, the last part of our strategy. If something gets really expensive, the sharing community is going to be there to pay bills. And then we will talk about some limits to the plan real quick before we turn it over. If you have conditions that are pre-existing to you signing up, there will be a 1-year wait. So if you're paying for cancer meds, this is not the plan for you. If you don't have expensive pre-existing conditions, yeah, we won't say no. You can join us, but just know about that wait for pre-existing. If you're a smoker, you can use our AI, artificial intelligence assessment, to learn ways to quit smoking, but we will surcharge you, and we will put limits on the sharing for diseases related to the smoking. Number 3, for drugs, when you're experiencing an expensive sickness or accident, we will pay for them, but after 4 months, especially after the doctor says you're cured, we're going to change the characterization of those drugs to maintenance, and maintenance meds are on you. We will help you find cheaper generics overseas, and you can use your savings accounts to pay for them with tax advantages, but know that the sharing of it ends after a period. And finally, the out-of-pocket that we described earlier, the initial unshared amount, is per episode, not a deductible that starts over the next year. So it doesn't reset annually, and it extends for many years, however long the disease lasts, which is great, because if you do have an expensive episode, chances are it may last beyond a year. And in our case, your out-of-pocket does not reset. Once you've paid your $500 to $5,000, you're done. We share everything above that. Now, you can incur up to 3 or 5 expensive episodes per year, which could sound very expensive. It's 3 per individual, 5 per family. But if you consider the fact that only 10% of Americans spend $3 grand in healthcare a year, the likelihood of you having cancer, a heart attack, and a car accident in the same year is very low. So that is not a very realistic exposure. But it is a clean way to pay for medical bills. Whenever something exceeds 500 or 5,000, we're going to share. And if you have 3 of those expensive episodes in a year, we won't make you pay any dollars on the 4th episode, or in the case of a family, the 6th episode. So that's how the out-of-pocket for us, the initial insured amount, compares to a deductible. Who's promoting us? Lots of health groups like the National Health Federation, trade associations like the Professional Appraisers, activist groups like Liberty International and now the Republican Liberty Caucus, and pioneers in direct primary care like Dr. Ray Cordenoy, a chapter president of the Free Market Medical Association. For questions or to enroll, just click yourfreedomhub.com and you will be connected to an agent for a discussion on whether this is right for you. Now, while the segue to Abigail is that while we create cash payers, which is great for the market because it discourages prices, it supports shopping, it allows the independent doctors to get a cash resource so they can say no to the third-party insurance interlopers, there are still limits to the choices you can get in the market because of government, usually in collusion with the big crony corporations that use government to limit competition. So a lot of our friends are activists, including Abigail Nobel with the Michigan Healthcare Freedom Group. She is a homeschooled, successful registered nurse in surgery and ambulatory care, and has a master's in politics from Hillsdale. And the 3 big topics she will discuss for her state, which apply to most states because state issues kind of happen in all 50 states, are how prescribing laws limit choice and thus boost your costs and lessen your quality, how licensing compacts are a temptation for medical professionals, but often just add a new layer of bureaucracy and can have an insidious effect on conformity, which you don't want in medicine, because medicine is an art, not just a science. And finally, the role of Medicaid expansion and other government programs and how they really hurt competition, which is critical for healthcare freedom and innovation. And with that, Abigail, I will unmute you. And let me just...
There we go.
There you are.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Abigail Nobel. Thanks, Charlie. I appreciate the Academy of Health Excellence and Health Excellence Plus for this opportunity to be with you. Yes, 3 big state barriers to the healthcare market. I'm going to lead off with health license compacts. Just when you thought that healthcare could not be more regulated, along comes a row of compacts, adding another layer of healthcare regulators further from local control. The compacts are a constitutional provision for states to take over a federal function, which, as we all know, licensure is not. So right from the get-go, you should have a red flag hearing the word compact associated with licensure. Their argument is an easier life for traveling medical people and for telehealth, but reciprocity could achieve that at far lower cost and complication and no extra regulation, in fact. The provisions vary by profession. The physician compact is called an IMLC, has 29 states plus DC on board. It costs physicians $700 to join. It includes mandated mock, which of course is extra regulation of physicians in itself. I've heard a rumor that the psych type folks will have their own compact, but I've not yet seen a website. APRN nurses have 3 states on board. They're just starting out. Physical therapy has 28 states plus DC. And nurses have 30 states. Michigan would be 31 if it passes. I testified against it in April in Michigan and found out that there's a $6,000 state fee to join this compact. It usually mandates that the state nurse board be the representative to the compact, and it takes you 6 months for the state to be able to leave the compact if they so choose. There are universal provisions that apply to all the compacts. Number 1, these compacts are independent. There is no voter accountability. So the people that you elect are not even part of this board and have no oversight over it. There's no state oversight, no congressional oversight. The president can't do anything about it. In fact, state and federal regulators can't even do anything about it. This is a truly independent compact. If you want to take somebody to court, you're going to have to go out of state to do it. Number 2, they have unlimited regulatory powers over the professionals that are in these participating states. Quoting from one of the compacts that applies to all of them, rulemaking is legally binding in all party states. There is no requirement that rules be ratified or adopted by individual states. This point, joining compact licensure is voluntary for individual healthcare professionals within each state, but because the compact creates parallel licensure, I believe the push will be to eliminate the state rule entirely in favor of a single compact, because we all know how progressives love efficiency. Danger signs inherent within these compacts, too, are the unconstitutional use of legislative powers. You may be familiar with the non-delegation doctrine. People that we elect have the power to make rules for us. They do not have the power to pass along the power to others. So, in fact, it is a form of taxation without representation, because we know that regulations are a tax on healthcare. The term that a lot of professionals might use to describe this structure is self-governance, but it's actually ivory tower tyranny. Their so-called professional autonomy just simply means that the experts in your professional will rule the individuals. Compact boards are controlled by educational and accreditation industries. Who benefits? The industry mergers, I think, are the big beneficiaries here, especially the vertical ones. We have hospitals joining insurance companies, joining PBMs, joining travel agencies. So you've got one big company town. The goal is erasing not just state lines, but national ones. The main lobby for the Nurse Licensure Compact also happens to sell the Global Regulatory Atlas. And if you're hearing echoes of CPT codes in the AMA, so am I. The Free Press report from Detroit in December reported on a symposium including Michigan, the Great Lakes states, and Ontario in a healthcare symposium. So I believe this is in the works behind the scenes. They would like to have global healthcare control. Action that you can take. Regulation equals your time, money, and sanity. So I do encourage you to check in with your state to find out the current state of your state with the Licensure Compact and fire off a message to your state representative and senator opposing them. So that's the long one that I wanted to report and give you a briefing on. The second one is about biologics. A little policy battleground information. Most drugs are chemical. Biologics are different. They're cell-based. They're very effective. They are exponentially more expensive in research and development and sale prices. 2% of U.S. prescriptions are for biologics, but 40% of prescription spending goes to biologics. So these are the big dogs when it comes to money. The projected 5-year U.S. profits are $92.5 billion. The battle for market share, always intense, shot up when the first generation biologics began to come off patent after 30 years. They were given extended patent because of the high expense to develop. Common uses for these meds are prolific: diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, MS, muscular dystrophy, lung disease, lupus, chemo, vaccinations. Some of the common names that you hear that are biologics are Enbrel, Humira, Rituxan, etanercept, Avastin, Lantus. These are not cheap drugs. If we could get a generic effect going with them, that a pharmacist could substitute at will at the counter for any prescription, we could save, with chemical drugs, they saved 80% once competition really got going. With these drugs, it's been predicted that they could save between 40 and 80%, depending on how many people would start producing. Probably not the same savings as the generics saw because they are more complicated to produce. However, naturally, when the biologic manufacturers failed to maintain their legal advantage with Congress by further extending their patents, they went out to the states. And it was at that point that I was alerted to this and went and testified in Michigan against the poison pill bill that had been introduced. And these don't look the same in healthcare as they do in the rest of the market. Most industries, you can identify where there's a market barrier. Healthcare, it's a little bit more tricky. Couple of definitions first. A biologic we've talked about. A biosimilar is a second generation biologic that can be prescribed for the same purpose. And interchangeable is the word that they use instead of generic. It is simply a biosimilar that's approved by the FDA as safe, having the same effect, a similar profile all the way around. But because it is a cell base instead of a chemical base, you can't just put it under the microscope and say this is the exact same thing. So for pharmacists to be able to substitute, you needed to pass new state law incorporating the language of interchangeable along with the previous generic prescriptions. So what happened in Michigan is we had two proposals for prescription interchangeable. One of them contained the poison pill, the other did not. This was back in 2015. Under guise of patient safety, they hyped up how dangerous these drugs were and said, we really need the pharmacy to notify the prescriber when they substitute. It's not enough that the law just allows them to substitute without any closing of that loop. Well, this sounded pretty innocuous to legislators, and they were going to pass it. However, most Michigan pharmacies do not have an auto notification system. That would include hand paperwork, phone calls, more red tape, a genuine burden, and a deterrent in an already overloaded system. It would cause at least, I believe, a majority of pharmacists to pause before dispensing the more affordable medication. The insiders that would speak with me agreed and said it would delay the generic effect at least 3 years. So that was a bad one. I stopped it that term. The following term, they proposed it again within a few days of when my family member was diagnosed with cancer and my back was turned, and that one got passed. So it is now Michigan law. They added a couple other crazy provisions as well, which are certainly not going to speed up the market. So that's biologics. I do recommend that you check with current law and the ability to substitute at your pharmacy. On the manufacturing side and the FDA side, these medications have not yet been approved for interchangeable status by the FDA. So there is still time to make sure you've got clean state law that allows these horrendous prices to come down for consumers. And even facilitate, I think, the physicians to be able to dispense from their office. 3, the welfare system fights for market share in state law. It's an odd thought. In a sense, welfare enrollees are a commodity in an unfair trade market, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that. It's odd. Who wants to take on paying for care for the poor? We don't think of that as a desired role. It's expensive. But step into the bureaucratic mindset for a moment. Bureaucrats gain identity, justify their position and their program by their budget size and their enrollment numbers. You can relate it to schools on count day. It's a big deal for them. One great story about the federal side of this comes from a private sector charity. And we free marketers, libertarian types, tend to complain about churches not doing their Christian duty caring for the poor. In fact, many churches and other private organizations do try, but they hit a wall of government competition. The True Charity Initiative operates under the Watered Garden Gospel Rescue Mission. The time that I first heard of it in 2015, their primary service was as a charity tracker. They had at that time 10 years of connecting 70 nonprofits in 70,000 cities to identify abusers of charity. They provided accountability and targeted services to those in need. Wonderful service. They did amazing work. Their philosophy is the inherent rights of life, liberty, and property, an earn it mentality. They effectively decreased homelessness and panhandling. Kind of cool. Their problem was that there was no way to coordinate with USDA food stamps, which keeps people in bondage to fear of losing the benefit. That was keeping them back from making people truly independent and able to live on their own. The example that I have from the state level is I noticed going through grad school, I cared for a disabled child in her home. I gradually noticed that the TV in the background was running multiple radio and TV ads advertising Medicaid. Well, in Michigan, Medicaid expansion was called Healthy Michigan, and so they didn't use the word Medicaid. But the whole thing stunk to me. I brought it to the attention of my state senator. She didn't even believe me at first that we were advertising Medicaid, but she found that the department was actually spending $2 million annually, $1 million from federal taxes and $1 million from state. The department, when it was brought to their attention, kind of objected weakly. They wanted to protect their partnership arrangement with the private sector. When I testified on the bill at my senator's request, the agency actually approached the committee chair privately afterwards and said that if the bill was pulled, they would pull the spending. The chair agreed. Bill language was inserted into the annual appropriations process to prevent this from happening again. You really cannot compete with government. They not only have force, but they take your dollars and they use them against you. So my conclusion from all three of these is it is very important for people to offer affordable alternatives. Kudos to those to help people stay free of the demeaning and sticky welfare system. New state barriers are raised to affordable, independent health care every week, if not every day. If you would like to assist with Michigan Healthcare Freedom's mission of taking down state barriers by donating toward our web building fund, please contact me at policyrnabby@gmail.com. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
That was very good, Abby, and apologize, just to pause on my computer. I want to close your Facebook group that I was showing, slowing down my my laptop here. I'm going to unmute everyone, and if you want to click the raise hand icon, that's how we can help you ask that question. But first, Abby, I'll go ahead and get started. As we discussed previously, your interstate compact, I can see how it can sell well with doctors and other health professionals as a way to go across state lines. But what you and I were saying is, why don't they just promote reciprocity? Why this additional layer of bureaucracy, and how might that push a conformity, which is always a problem with licensure in general? What do you say about that whole reciprocity alternative?
Well, reciprocity is the traditional method of taking care of state line barriers to professionals who, maybe live in one state, practice in another, or practice travel care, that they go and take 3 or 6 month contracts in another state, having to go through the lengthy, burdensome system of applying for a license in that state. There is reciprocity. And when they passed for nursing, the NCLEX exam being the same for all states and Canada, that really took away a lot of the barrier to reciprocity. We all take the same test. So the license is the same. It should be pretty equivalent. There are still individual state provisions within licensure for credit hours, ongoing education. A little bit different name for each profession, but we all have them. A few states let people get away without them. I think it makes sense to go without them. It's sort of a separate topic about barriers. The big state policy, or I should say the traditional barrier to going full reciprocity, unions and regulators and state legislators like to maintain their own state distinctives. It's a sort of a proxy for quality of our health care, that we demand more education in this area, whether it's through the colleges or through credit hours. And that's a barrier to full reciprocity. So you could call this compact system an end run around that. However, costing states the amount it does and costing the professions that amount of regulation, each of these compacts is 20 plus pages long. I think Michigan, the nursing one was like 27. So there's significant provision in there. I'd like to just read you briefly the rule from the compact. The rulemaking is legally binding in all party states. There's no requirements that rules be ratified or adopted by individual states. The procedural requirements are based on the National Model Administrative Procedures Act, which is similar to what the federal agencies have to use. In order to change any of their rules, they have to give provision of notice, opportunity for comment, opportunity for public hearing, consideration and voting upon proposed rules, responding to comments received. But in the end, they can do what they choose. It's the story of regulation. You're right to follow their rules, pay their fees, and do what they say in order to work. I did also bring more information about each of these categories if people are interested in looking up more. You put up there the compact talking points resources and so on are in my article on rightmichigan.com. You can find it under globalization of healthcare. More information for people who are not familiar with MOC, the Maintenance of Certification for Physicians, go to megedison.com. She's the pediatrician in my area who led the national charge against MOC. Incredible information there, very well written. The information on biologics you can find at my old website, Dewdrops of Health with Abigail. It's probably front page right now. Lancing Battles Over Biologics is one of the titles. And then Alvek Roy also wrote in Forbes very recently, March of this year, on biologic medicines, the biggest driver of rising drug prices. Very interesting article. A lot of updates since I first researched this in 2015. And then the charitable competition, as it were, that organization that I talked to you about, the True Charity Initiative, it's really worthwhile checking out their website. They're based in Joplin, Missouri, and their website is truecharity.us.
That's wonderful. I have a question, and I'll turn it over then to Tim Daney. If you want to unmute yourself, Tim, I see you have your hand up. And by the way, folks, if you look at your laptop on the control screen on the right, below your mute button in green is a hand raise option. Just click that, and we'll call on you to ask a question. So Tim, I see yourself muted. Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes, I just figured out how to unmute. Thank you. Yeah, Abigail, I'm from Michigan also, and I'm sure you know the push, or I don't know if you've heard of the push that this guy, Rahib, something like that, is actually pushing for a Michigan single payer system separate from the rest of the country. And you had mentioned something about a Michigan and Ontario or something like that coalition that is to me really strange, and how that could even happen. And I'm just getting on board with this whole deregulation stuff, and I'm wondering what we can do to further the cause against this regulation stuff, and how to get the word out and educate people.
For sure. Excellent question. Do you by any chance know if they've proposed the bill yet in Michigan?
This guy is trying to push it through. I was actually just at a town hall meeting, and they this past weekend, and it's the first time I heard about it, and I was like, wow, this guy's actually trying to do this in Michigan by itself to push it, and it's probably coming up. They haven't, I don't know if he's actually tried to pass it yet, but it's happening. And
Okay. Tell me his last name one more time.
Oh gosh, bear with me and I'll look up his info. If you want to go to another question, let me look up his exact info, and I'll mute myself here a second.
Okay. I'll
Sure.
I'll run through what I would start with on this. The Detroit information, I believe it was the Detroit Free Press that gave that report on the Michigan-Ontario Symposium. I would look it up with their name. Just Google Healthcare Symposium, Detroit, Ontario, and I think you would get it to come up. and there
Yep.
you'll find more details there. With opposing anything like this, I would start with the Vermont example. They are the classics that started their own single-payer system. It was within the past year that they were forced to shut it down because their state could not make it sustainable. The free market works, and the opposite most emphatically does not.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So yeah, this guy's name is Yosef Rabi.
Oh,
Yosef Rabi. He's the state representative for
okay.
the Ann Arbor district, and yeah, it was kind of appalling, some of the things that they were saying and the ideas that they have. Really, that you know, they're gonna make it one thing for everybody, but it's just not going to work. How they
Yeah.
do it. But I appreciate your effort. I appreciate your effort. I'm going to try to find you and link up with you because I'm right here in Michigan.
Excellent.
So,
I would love to do that. I'm on LinkedIn under
yeah.
Abigail Nobel, and I'm on Facebook at Michigan Healthcare Freedom. It's a group and a page, so if you join both, that's a good way to connect, and feel free to friend me on Facebook as well. It's easy messaging that way.
Yeah, I will. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Sure. One more
Thank-
comment about Michigan. We do have a Democrat governor, Secretary of State, and Attorney General. They sort of swept the state posts, but the legislature, both Representative and Senate, is completely controlled by the Republicans. And so a Democrat bill like is extremely unlikely to get through. So you can take
Abby,
comfort from that, but I would love to get exposure.
Abby, if I can have you pause a second. If folks could mute themselves, if they have background noise, it's interfering with the conversation.
I'm on their website for the My Healthy.
Okay.
Abby, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, just to clarify, for Michigan, I'm not terribly concerned that this is going to go anywhere right now with a Republican-controlled legislature, both chambers, even though we do have a significant number of Democrats, they are in a minority. And this is a very partisan issue. It's just the nature of healthcare right now that single payer is a popular on the Democrat side and not popular on the Republican side. So I don't think it will go anywhere. That changes when you change elections because parties will flip their position on issues, and it just pays to watch everybody and watch them closely.
Absolutely. And while you're focusing on Michigan, here in Virginia, we face the same issues. So what happens in one state has happened or will happen in another state. Hence my interest in having you speak, because all 50 states face these efforts to protect industry against competition. Dave Demers, if you want to unmute yourself, I see you have a hand up.
Thank you, Charlie. Abigail, from your experience, what do you find to be the most effective strategy or strategies in fighting these government intrusions into healthcare and medications at the state level?
Yes. For each case is a little bit different. I look at the individual situations from a policy perspective. And with the biologics, the normal legislative ignorance about healthcare is compounded. You could tell them the word biologic and they would not know that it was a medication or that it was related to human health. They truly would know absolutely nothing. And so going in as a subject matter expert was extremely valuable. I brought the economic perspective for patients with medications, for the general market, for the CPI. I brought the congressional special provisions and the testimony that was given 30 years ago when they got their 30-year patent extension. I brought a patient story that told how difficult it already is to be prescribed and to get a maintained supply of biologics. And I brought the FDA statement on the fact that they take care of safety, and once they approve these things, they are good to go in the states and no extra provisions are needed for safety. So kind of the multi-prong approach for that particular one. Other types of laws that go through, my former state senator had been a sheriff, and his regular, like every 6 months, it felt like he was tweaking abusable drug prescribing laws so that the physicians' offices and the paying patients were being yanked one way and then another. There was just no consistency, no stability with prescribing opioids or Sudafed. Those were the two big ones. And I get law enforcement wanting to do their job, but they should not be doing it on the backs of people in healthcare. There's just simply no justice there. I never geared up to oppose that, and I haven't seen them since he got termed out. So there's one bid for term limits, I guess. But yeah, it really is a case-by-case basis. There is a lot of value to being a subject matter expert. It helps to broaden your expertise beyond simple health care. If you can bring in the economics of the situation, state legislators bow before federal law and congressional perspective too. So if you can bring in information from that, as well as patient stories, because most people do think on the emotional level these days. It's not just pure logic. You bring in the emotional stories on your side, and you can make tracks with that.
So I'm not a subject matter expert. Definitely follow the healthcare very closely. How would I go about finding subject matter experts?
You look at your bill and you pick the classification of medication and you figure out who's prescribing most of it, who will be most impacted by this bill. And then you go through your list of contacts and you find one, or you walk into your local pharmacy and say, hey, I know something that is going to mess up your life. Who do I talk to? Who's the top pharmacist? And you try to find the ones that are the oldest, the most experienced, that carry the most gravitas to walk into a committee hearing room with you.
Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Abby. Jane Dolan, I see you were trying to get unmuted. I think you have a background in nursing too, and activism and innovation in the market. Do you happen to have a question? You're unmuted.
Yeah. Hi, can you hear me?
Barely.
Hi, Jane.
Hi there. I'm just wondering what is happening in your state in regards to like forced vaccinations and where you stand on that.
I didn't quite hear the issue name.
On forced vaccinations, on taking away religious and philosophical exemptions on vaccines.
Gotcha. Yes. We happen to have what I think may be the top organization in the country for organizing and getting activism out to citizens with subject matter experts. It's called Michigan for Vaccine Choice. They've done excellent work. They found, for example, in the schools, the waiver that the school system came up with our Department of Health and Human Services basically incriminated anyone who signed it as knowingly endangering other children in the schools and their own child's health. It was horrible. It was unconstitutional in the face of it, even aside from the vaccine issue and the parental rights issue. It was terrible. They pulled in all kinds of information from federal law and that they opposed it. I think it's been pulled. And multiple issues, of course, because mandatory vaccines enters into healthcare for health professionals who work in hospitals. yeah, it's a huge issue. The government has really put its thumb on the side of manufacturers in this particular area of medications.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad to hear that good things are happening in your state, because it's getting scary in some of the other states, such as New York. They lost their religious exemption for students entering public schools, so they're all being mandated now that they either get the vaccines or they cannot attend.
It is a huge area of health freedom, and it's truly appalling the direction that it's going right now. I do take encouragement, and maybe the rest of you can too, from the fact that the longer people live, and regulators and legislators are people too, the longer they live, the more likely they are to come in contact with someone, possibly even a family member who has experienced vaccine harm. And once you see that, once you realize how significant and lifelong that impact is, a former legislator of mine was the top Liberty guy in the House while he was there, and he did not know until he got termed out and saw on my Facebook group that there was a secret court for vaccines. People just simply don't know these things until they learn. So keep educating.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you for all the work you're doing, and great presentation tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Indeed. Thank you, Jane and Abby. Anyone else? For coming to the end of our hour here in a few minutes, just click the raise hand icon and ask any questions on keeping drugs out of the market, messing with licensing, or government competition with the private sector. Nurse Nobel is ready to take your question.
I actually used to work the nurse line, and so it's quite funny to hear that.
A couple of other related issues on licensing as we wait for folks to raise their hand and ask a question. We talked about this also earlier. Privatizing licensing is a big issue for Liberty folks, to allow any worker with a voluntary certification organization or accreditation organization to escape licensing, as long as the certification organization is registered with the state, and as long as the entrepreneur is following the criteria of that organization. And reformers believe that would really elevate the quality of these certification organizations. It would give them more money and prowess as they really try to make their brand known to customers. It would increase the quality of shopping for services as customers really engaged with the comparative differences of these different organizations. That's related to licensing. It's not in the short run as important as your compact issue is, but any thoughts on that?
Oh, it is big. It's huge. The national accrediting organizations do apply to all professions in one way or another. I believe they should be purely voluntary. I hesitate to see them enshrined in state law as a requirement for a profession. That was the method that was used in my state to force licensure on home birth midwives, and it put half of them in the state out of business. They were forced to comply with expensive education in order to meet the accreditation. And I think it's a step backward. I really would prefer to keep all accreditation on its own merits. If it's truly worth the value of getting the accreditation, it will be marketable to consumers by a professional saying, I have this accreditation, this is my sign of value. And if enough people do that and it truly is worth the value to the customer, that will become the industry standard by default. But doing so by law creates a tyrannical structure, I think.
Good feedback. Well, and then did you want to comment also on just intellectual property, how pharmaceutical companies do exploit that exclusive power that patents give them to sell without any competition and extend the life of those patents or broaden their applicability just to keep out competitors and thus artificially keep prices high? Is that an issue that you ever come across? I guess it's more of a federal issue than state.
You know, I did come across it with allergy meds. You're right, it is a federal issue. I've heard there are some FDA reforms that Congress is thinking about it, but I've not seen a bill number come through yet. But yeah, to change one little tiny aspect of, say, a Claritin molecule, and then pull out a new patent on it just to prevent the generic effect, that's pretty crass. I think it's immoral. It goes against the purpose of the patent, which is to protect new intellectual property in order to encourage more innovation. And what they're doing with it, as you describe, that is certainly not encouraging new innovation, new products, or competition.
Exactly. So let's click the raise hand option if anyone has a last question for Abigail Nobel. Well, seeing none, Abby, do you have any last recommendation how folks can reach you and maybe learn not just about Michigan issues, but how they might get involved in their state?
Absolutely. I would welcome anyone to contact me at policyrnabby, A-B-B-Y, @gmail.com. We're building the Michigan Healthcare Freedom webpage, and the Web Building Fund is increasing daily, so we appreciate donations to that to help us get up and running. I would also welcome conversation about duplicating our structure in another state. There are specific things that it took to get here. It's been a 10-year process for me, and I welcome conversations on that. I look forward to hearing from people.
Wonderful, Abby. This is fantastic. And before we close, a reminder of coming guests next week with Pat Jarrett with Health Savings Administrators. The Health Savings Account is a great tool to help catch paying, and it is an account that is used for expenditures, but a lot of financial planners will tell you to invest those funds for retirement as a vehicle superior even to IRAs. Learn about that, HSAs for retirement, next week. 7 Eastern. In 2 weeks, savings accounts aren't for everyone. Some folks need some more free zero copay visits with primary care doctors, and that is our Provider Direct option. We'll have the Redirect CEO Dave Sleepak introduce that option for our members. In 3 weeks, doctors who want to go independent need cash payers, and that is what we create at Health Excellence Plus and yourfreedomhub.com. And we'll have another DPC pioneer, Lee Heeb from Nebraska and Iowa. She is a doctor who also removes tattoos, which apparently is a growing market. Joining her will be David Demarest from Roads to Freedom. They're all in that Omaha, Nebraska area. So join us for that. And finally, a great friend and innovator, Tom Acklin. He is studying the gut fascia connection for health. A lot of your problems and disease starts with bacteria issues in your gut, and also extends to your fascia, that muscle connecting all of your tissues. So thanks again, Abby. This is a wonderful event, and we'll end it here.